Hi there, I'm your host, John Ivison, and I'm delighted to say that this week we welcome to the show the leader of the NDP, Jagmeet Singh. Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. So, are you down for the summer or down for a few weeks? Are you able to take some time off with your family?
I will be. Yeah. So we did a work travel trip to New York. So it was meetings, but also some fun time and relaxing as well. The one thing I found really relaxing was nobody knew me in New York, which is very different from in Canada. So just the sheer fact of walking around and not being known was kind of relaxing in a way.
And you've got, an 18-month-old daughter now, Anad?
Anhad, yeah, she's
Anhad.
almost a year and a half. Yeah.
Right, so you're getting some sleep at least, which is more than I'm getting. I've got a 9-month-old and we're still in the no sleep
Oh
hell.
wow. Yeah, that's no good. But it's a beautiful journey, sir. You'll enjoy it.
Yeah, and I've got umpteen kids, so this is not I'm not my first rodeo, but this will
Okay,
surprise
okay.
this might surprise people in that the viewers who might imagine that the Post's curmudgeonly columnist and the leader of the avowedly left of centre NDP. They might imagine that we were antagonistic to one another, but we have some history. And I came on the 2021 campaign with you, and after a week I laid down my sword. You know,
We had a good
they're
bonding time.
they're good people, and the events were fun. And I think during that very cynical campaign, it was good for the soul to be surrounded by New Democrats. And I think I even said that they're the only ones who believe it all.
I
And you were
appreciate that. I
even
remember you saying that, and it was really special to hear that. And
yeah.
we
Well, I
really
think
do, and we had an awesome time.
I think it's true, and you were even good enough to my children. I've got a 19-year-old. He was 19 then, and you were good enough to spend some time with him. And I remember him coming out and I warned him that party platforms are not written under oath, and that sometimes parties might not deliver on all their promises. And he turned around and went, "Are they allowed to do that, Dad?" The boy's got a lot of learning to do about politics. Anyway. Tweets are not endorsements, and I remain sceptical about your confidence and supply agreement with the Liberals. But can we turn first to the public inquiry into foreign intervention? And I know
Sure.
that you said at one point that you said you were worried that they were the Liberals were simply buying time and then could abandon their efforts by saying that the opposition couldn't come to an agreement. And we saw this when the Liberals brought in electoral reform and eventually abandoned it, saying the opposition couldn't agree. Do you think they're bargaining in good faith?
Well, we were very specific in this approach, knowing that what the Liberals had done in the past. We were very critical or very very suspicious about their initial overture, saying that they would be open. I want to just take people back a bit, just to remind folks. From the beginning, we asked for a public inquiry. We forced votes in Parliament on a public inquiry. Despite having an agreement, we showed we could still be oppositional, critical, and we forced 2 votes on having a public inquiry. And one of those votes included getting the special rapporteur to step down. The special rapporteur has obviously stepped down, and the government's now announced some opening towards a public inquiry. I'd like to say we've shown that we can both be oppositional, critical, put pressure on the government, and get things done. And so now what we said, and I made this really clear to the Prime Minister as well as to the opposition leaders, we can't allow the Prime Minister to use this opportunity to then point out, every opposition leader has a different view. Okay, there's not consensus. We're not going to go ahead. So I said, that's not going to fly. I want a forum. I want a process where we all come together and make the decision together. And so it looks like that's happening. I've entrusted this job to Peter Julian, my House Leader, and there's negotiations happening. I think they're in good faith, and I am cautiously optimistic that they'll move forward.
So do you have an agreement in principle that a public inquiry will take place, and we're now down to talking about terms of reference and who will preside over it?
Well, that's one point that we still haven't heard them publicly announce that they will have a public inquiry, and so we're not letting up the pressure to assume that this work is going towards an outcome when they haven't yet said, yes, we're going to do a public inquiry. So we're still holding out for them to say those words and to say that they're going to do it. But the negotiations are getting down to some of the details, and we're requiring that the Liberals make sure every opposition leader that's recognized has input and that they are in agreement with the way forward.
And do you have any suggestions on who should be in charge of this inquiry?
What we've said is we don't want to get into the details of names. And the reason why I say that is, in a way, the Bloc kind of walked into their own trap. They gave a name, a justice that I respect, I think is someone very worthy of, incredibly credible, very talented justice.
It was Louise Arbour?
Yeah, Louise Arbour. Her daughter was a candidate for us. Of course, I think that she would be phenomenal. But Justice Arbour has some, maybe not the deepest connection, but some connection to the Trudeau Foundation. And that was exactly what the Bloc had said was their concern. So what we've set is criteria: judge, either current or former, no connection to the Trudeau Foundation. Given the appearance of bias and the problems around that, I think we should just avoid that entirely. And someone that all the parties can agree with. So those are just the starting points, and I think we can work with that. We need to obviously vet people, but those criteria, I think, are starting points.
What will be the consequences from your perspective if the Liberals either drag their feet or refuse to hold a public inquiry? Could that blow up the confidence and supply agreement?
Well, the agreement that we have is forcing the government to do certain things that they wouldn't otherwise do. And to give some evidence to that, they voted against our dental care program 2 years ago. And that exact program that we had campaigned on, that we had promised, like we told your son, we promised to deliver, we're delivering that now. That's actually happening. That exact program that the Liberals opposed just 2 years ago is now exactly what's happening. So we don't want to let them off the hook. Really, the agreement forces them to do things that they wouldn't otherwise do. Tearing up the agreement will let them off the hook, and they would love to be let off the hook and not have to deliver these things. So we want to hold that document to make sure they deliver these things. But we would say that they would lose a lot of trust with us, but also with the public, that it's become very clear there is an erosion of trust in the institutions, in our democracy. We're seeing a decrease in voter turnout. There's an apathy. I want to turn that around. I want to increase voter participation. I really believe that voting matters. And I feel like the cynicism that's come in is only going to be worse or exacerbated by people who think that, what's the point of voting? And now, what's the point of voting? On top of that, there's this foreign interference. I don't really know what's going on, but it doesn't seem good. That's only going to make things worse. That benefits, I think, in a self-serving way, the status quo parties that benefit from lower voter turnout. We also not just believe in it because it's a part of our name as the New Democratic Party. We also benefit when more people come out to vote. So our values are very much aligned with our interests in this case. We believe in democracy, we believe in people voting, and in fact, we do better when more people vote. So we want to participate, we want to encourage participation. So we think this would be harmful to that trust. So we want to encourage people to get out to vote. We want people to have trust in the system, and that's why the public inquiry is important.
The logic of that is that we're not going to have an election this side of a public inquiry. You want a public inquiry to fix the trust issue, and we can't have an election before that. Does that follow?
Well, that's what I've said is I want to see some steps taken before we have an election. If the concern is there's interference and we don't know the full extent of it, and we certainly aren't doing enough to stop it in our nomination processes or in other elements of the election, though it's not, and there's no evidence that changed the outcome, just the fact that it isn't interfered is problematic. I want to see some steps taken to remedy that, rectify that before we go to an election.
Just a thought that occurs to me. I mean, you're really on your last kick of the can if things don't go well in the next election. How much of this is personal, that you want to not go to an election because you like being leader, and if you're a leader and you lose seats, that's it?
Well, I would say I'm not particularly worried about that kind of calculus. I mean, I'm in a good position, lots of party support, so I'm not worried about that. But what I am worried about is not being able to deliver on things that Canadians would benefit from. I really want to see the dental care program roll out. I've spoken with lots of seniors that I also promised that by the end of this year, they're going to be able to get their teeth looked after. The program that we have will help millions of seniors, millions of people in our country. The cutoff for the dental care program is under 70,000. That's a significant number of seniors that earn less than 70,000. and it will make their lives better. I think about all the seniors that I've met. I met a senior in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, named Brenda, and she has to choose between eating and sleeping, because when she eats, her teeth hurt so much at night that she can't sleep. So sometimes she goes to bed hungry. And I told her, you will be able to get your teeth looked after. And she's like, that's all I want. I think I've worked hard my whole life. I don't have enough money to pay for this. I tried hard to save up, but I just can't save up the thousands of dollars I need to get my teeth looked after. So that's really what I want to see done. I want to see those things happen.
So can we look at the broader political landscape for a minute? You're at 20% in an average of the polls. The same level you were at in the week before the 2021 election, at which point on election day your vote fell off to 18%. The same phenomenon that happened in 2019. In the by-elections this month, the party averaged 11.5% over the 4 seats. Are you more or less doomed to lose support when people go to the ballot box?
Well, we often joke about this thing that when people tell us, or we see the public opinion polling, people like the work we're doing, they trust us, they trust me as leader, and something happens between that moment when they like what we're doing, they trust us, they value the work, and they go to the ballot box, they somehow just end up going back to Liberal. So that is a challenge, absolutely. I feel a couple of things are going on. One, what we heard from a lot of people is that we like your ideas, but we're not sure that you can actually deliver on them. Well, we're delivering. We're showing people we can deliver. We're delivering the first expansion of our healthcare system in a generation, and Canadians are going to start to see that benefit. Already for the children under 12, the program very quickly was subscribed very well. 300,000 kids have already received that payment, that support to get their teeth looked after. I met this man who said among the most important women in my life, my daughter and my mom are both going to get their teeth looked after because of you. And I feel like we're concretely making things better for people. We can use that as an example of how we deliver concrete results. And I think there is a very hopeful future for us. And the fact that we've consistently held a good level of support amongst Canadians, to me, shows that our work is penetrating, our work is being appreciated, and I hope people are benefiting directly from this.
I mean, it's one thing knowing there's a problem, it's another thing rectifying it. And I remember talking to your team before the 2021 election, and they were saying this time it will be different. This time Project Fear will not work. We're saving up money at the back end of the campaign. We're aware that people are likely to be scared into moving to the Liberals by the prospect of a Conservative government. This time will be different. In the event it was not different, how do you stop that? Is it simply that you've now demonstrated that there are concrete things that you're doing?
I think there's a couple of things. One is that we've shown that we can deliver. I think that's certainly going to help. One of the challenges that I mentioned, that people really liked us, but they weren't sure that we could deliver. We're showing that. So we've addressed that concern. The other concern is the fear of the Conservatives. The different thing this time around is that we're really letting people know, if you're frustrated with the Conservatives, there's also many people frustrated with the Liberals. It doesn't have to be either or. There is another option out there. And 10 years into a Liberal government, people are starting to feel a little bit weary of that. And if there's folks thinking about change, we're saying we can be that change. If you're worried about housing, if you're worried about healthcare, if you're worried about making sure we move forward on expanding our healthcare and having a government that's going to take on the problems that you're faced with in a way that really addresses what you're going through. One of the big problems people are faced with is cost of living. One of the major drivers of cost of living by many economists, the emerging consensus is a seller's inflation or a profit-driven inflation. The IMF, which by no means is a progressive organization, has in a report said that a significant portion, almost 50% of the cost of living increase in Europe can be attributable to high corporate profits. Neither the Liberals or the Conservatives will take that on. When it comes to things like some stability, when people are worried about what's going to happen in their future, having a good healthcare system that's public and universal, New Democrats are there to rely on for that, if that's something that's important to you. And for the housing that we're in, the mess that we're in, the market caused this problem. The market's not going to solve the problem. And people are starting to see that it's not just about supply. We absolutely need to build more homes, but we also need to build homes that are affordable. And we have to look at non-market housing and purpose-built rental housing that's affordable. And we have to look at other countries that have figured this out. And a lot of countries have shown that you can't just rely on a private or market solution to solve the housing crisis in their countries. So we know that the Liberals and Conservatives won't look outside a strict housing solution that's market-driven. We're saying let's be flexible and look at all the solutions and look at countries that are working or that have worked and solved this problem.
Well, let's just take those in turn, the healthcare, and then move to the economy. I mean, on dental benefit, clearly this was your initiative. It wasn't in the Liberal platform in 2021, as was pharmacare. I think I suggested one time that you're going to end up like the spluttering, like the scientists who claimed they'd invented the light bulb. Well, all the money went to Thomas Edison. How do you translate to the public that that this was a New Democrat initiative and it wouldn't have happened without the New Democrats?
This is the one area where I really think that the public knows. And it's rare that this happens, but because we were so focused and we let people know this is what we ran on, we committed to making this happen. And as soon as we had a position of power to make it happen, we did make it happen. I'm confident that people will know. But even if they don't know, ultimately for me, the goal is to actually give people dental care. And if they don't actually know who did it, that's not as important as actually making sure people can get their teeth looked after. I'm hopeful people will remember that we fought for them. But if they're getting their teeth looked after, that's the victory in and of itself.
On pharmacare, you're demanding a universal single-payer public drug plan, an idea that's been around since the mid-'60s. Yet the provinces are lukewarm in it. They don't want strings attached to health money. Half of the Canadian workforce has an employer-based private insurance coverage. Why not just suggest a kind of fill-in-the-gaps approach, which is what former Finance Minister Bill Murneau wanted, where if you don't have insurance, here's a scheme that'll cover you.
We were open to looking at different options, but we actually have a case study of what that results in Quebec. Quebec has exactly that program, has a fill in the gaps program, and it is the most expensive program in the world, and amongst the most expensive in the world, and it is just a very costly because you get none of the cost benefits and all of the negative side. The whole purpose of a single payer program, the reason why the government's own commission investigated this, Dr. Hoskins, who was a Liberal health minister, so there's if anything, there's bias towards the Liberals. His finding was that a universal single payer publicly delivered system is the best. And it's the best because we've got evidence around the world. And we can look at Quebec, where it was ahead of its time to come up with this idea of covering people who couldn't cover it. But now the unions there are saying our program, our costs to a worker who's got to buy the private program if their employer that they contribute to the program, it's a significant portion of their salary. For the folks that don't have employer coverage, it's a big drain on the provincial coffers. What we're suggesting is actually a cost savings. It's actually a very elegant solution. Every province and territory already spends money on medication. They already purchase medication for people in hospitals and other scenarios. The federal government already purchased medication for people in the military and people in Indigenous communities. What we're saying is the provincial governments would spend exactly what they spend, the same amount, no more. The federal government would make an initial increased investment, and in doing that, that would cover everyone in the province and territory. So the exact same amount of money the provinces are already spending wouldn't just cover people in hospitals, it would cover every single person. The bulk purchasing would bring down the price. It would ensure that there are lower prices in the long term. There would be savings for provinces, savings for territories, savings for the federal government eventually. And that's not even factoring in, that's by the Parliamentary Budget Office, but that's not even factoring in the benefit of the healthier communities or healthier people because they're able to afford their medication and the lower costs of long-term health. That's not something that's even factored in. So this is a big win. It makes sense. Every other country in the world that's got healthcare has done it for a good reason. It doesn't make sense that you can have healthcare coverage and not include medication. I believe it can be done. It'll save people lots of money, and it'll.
Well, but the initial cost is obviously $15 billion or more. Morneau said that he was baffled that the Liberal government was going to introduce the dental programme while it hadn't even finished addressing pharmacare. And it plays into something on the economy, which I'd like to hear your thoughts on. You have a reputation for authenticity, for fun, but do you think there's a brand problem with you personally and with the party as being unserious and not to be trusted when it comes to economic management?
I feel like there is a brand or an association with New Democrats in general. People think that we're not good at the economy. I think that is something that we're up against as a stereotype, much like people think conservatives are callous and they'll cut the programs you need, and the Liberals have a problem with corruption. These are brands that are built in, and I think a part of it is people think the New Democrats aren't as good on the economy. The actual evidence shows, if you look at all provincial governments, and there's been a number of provincial governments that are New Democrat, if you look at which ones have managed the economy the best, one of the drivers is making sure we're spending within our means. New Democrats actually come out on top. They actually have run better economically, have run better governments. If you look up and compare the Liberals, Conservatives, and other parties and New Democrats, we actually are amongst the best managers.
But Rachel Notley in Alberta tried to distance herself from you because of this in the last election there.
Well, I just want to point out that the evidence is New Democrats are good actually at managing our resources. And the number one example is Tommy Douglas, who really believed that we need to actually make sure we live within our means and we invest in people. I believe in it as well. I'm actually proposing a different approach. The decisions that both Liberals and Conservatives make, cutting taxes, that is a massive cost. That's a spend, actually. To cut taxes is spending lots of money, because when you cut taxes, where does the revenue come from that you've cut? It is a massive spend. The Liberals also are proposing spending measures without backing it up with revenue measures. We're the only party really serious about looking at increased revenue. And we're serious about that. We propose a number of ideas. Some of them actually we've forced the Liberal government to bring in higher taxes on the big banks and insurance companies, which was a part of our agreement, which has been enacted. We're looking at how do we increase our revenue in a responsible way while also investing in people. So we propose not just investing in people, but also revenue streams that neither the Liberals or Conservatives have either the belief in doing or the conviction to do.
But which if I remember from the last election, the parliamentary budget officer dismissed your revenue numbers when it came to taxing the super rich, in that the super rich find ways not to pay what they consider prohibitive taxes.
Well, they said that it would be hard to gauge how much that would raise, so they weren't able to say conclusively that this would increase by a certain number.
But you weren't able to say conclusively you would get the money.
Well, I would say that let's look at other countries that have actually done exactly what we proposed. United Kingdom, Spain, Germany have all put in place excess profit tax already. They are leading the way. And I would say Canada's become a laggard on this file, that they've acknowledged that there's a problem, that there is significant wealth and record profits being made by greedy CEOs. Why is it that they're not contributing fairly? And why is it that the effective tax rate of some of the wealthiest companies in the world has gone down while workers pay their fair share? There's an unfairness there. And there's also a serious problem with the CRA that does not follow through on corporate taxes that are actually owed without increasing or changing the current fiscal situation, just getting the taxes that they're owed, that they're not enforcing enough and losing billions of dollars. There's offshore tax havens, which is something that we could shut down, which would increase our revenue significantly. And then there's additional making sure that companies pay their fair share, which is I absolutely believe in. And just because it hasn't been done before doesn't mean it can't be done and that it won't be successful. There's ways that it can be done, and it requires vigilance, it requires conviction, and we have it.
Just to round up, I know we're running out of time here, but last year you said there was no merit in the Bank of Canada raising interest rates. Inflation in May was down to 3.4%, albeit with a large drop in gas prices that may go back up again. But do you think there's any merit in the bank increasing rates another quarter point, as many economists suggest is going to happen next month?
Well, we look at what's happened, and I had a really interesting conversation with the Roosevelt Institute in New York recently on this point, as well as a number of economists. The increase in the Bank of Canada, or the increase in the interest rates, has not actually, what it has effective, and this is a really interesting point, it has affected areas that are the least sensitive to interest rates. So gas prices have nothing to do with interest rates. The increase of interest rates did not in any way impact gas prices. It's set independently. It's set separate from the Bank of Canada. Those costs coming down were not in any way caused by the increased interest rates. We look at housing. That's one of the major costs of living that we talk about inflation. In terms of what is actually going on the ground, it has not become more affordable to buy a home in any really substantive way. And in fact, rents have gone up because mortgages have gone up. Mortgages going up means that people are having a harder and harder time buying their groceries, paying their bills. And food prices have not come down because of increased interest rates. So the problem is that the increasing interest rates is trying to solve a problem that has no bearing on interest rates. The cost of living crisis that we're experiencing right now, based on the economists, is caused by the war in Ukraine, supply chain issues that are kind of legacy because of COVID and ongoing because of COVID. So supply chain issues, the war in Ukraine, and corporate greed are the main contributors of cost of living. None of those things are sensitive to interest rate increases. So the interest rate increases cannot causally be linked to the cost of inflation going down. And in fact, it's only made life harder for people. And it really begs the question, why is this the only approach to the cost of living question or the inflation question? We need to be building more homes rapidly. That's going to help bring down the cost of housing. And we need to build homes that are both private and non-market housing so we can bring down the cost of housing. We need to address the actual problems. We need to tackle the high cost of groceries and food prices with a concerted effort towards that, not relying on interest rates to somehow bring down food prices, which they won't.
But I presume that a government led by you would leave the Bank of Canada independent, though, yeah?
What we would do is some of the mandate issues are set by the federal or by the government, and then the execution is independently done by the Bank of Canada. That structure is something we support and we would maintain. We think it should be independent. We wouldn't change the independence. But in the mandate, one of the things that should be considered is the decision to increase interest rates and the impact on employment. That's something that was raised as a factor, but it's not a part of the mandate. So it's not something the Bank of Canada has to really incorporate. I would find it very troubling that a Bank of Canada would make decisions to increase interest rates, to cause a recession and cause a massive loss of jobs, and that not be factored into their decision making. I also think when the federal government doesn't act to tackle inflation, the Bank of Canada is left with its only tool, which is increased interest rates. And so I blame the federal government's lack of action to tackle the real cost of living issues that people are dealing with for why the Bank of Canada is left with the only tool that it has, which is a sledgehammer of a tool that doesn't actually solve the problem that people are dealing with.
Great. Well, listen, we're out of time. I appreciate you coming on. Have a great summer, you and your family. All the best to you.
Hey, thanks so much. It was a good chat. I appreciate it.